I never thought I'd be the guy snooping around his wife's phone. But there I was, accidentally stumbling upon messages that screamed trouble. Can't wait to see you again, one read with a winking emoji that felt like a punch in the gut. I should have confronted her, demanded answers. Instead, I shoved the phone back where I found it and kept my mouth shut. Big mistake. Things got weirder. She, who always rushed home to catch her favorite TV shows, suddenly had a pile of late-night work. Big project. You wouldn't understand, she'd say with a dismissive wave, not even looking up from her laptop. I nodded, pretending to buy it. But inside, my doubts were doing somersaults. One evening, while grabbing a beer with a buddy, he casually mentioned seeing her. Yeah, saw your wife the other night. She was all dolled up at Giorgio's. Quite the fancy dinner. My heart sank. Giorgio's wasn't a place for casual work dinners. And she hated Italian cuisine. Something was off. That's when I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. Felt like a cliché straight out of a bad detective novel. But I needed the truth, no matter how ugly. I handed over a photo of her, and the pie gave me a knowing look. Didn't say much. Just a curt nod and a promise to keep me posted. While waiting for his report, I noticed another red flag. Our joint account, usually steady and predictable, turned into a roller coaster. Fancy clothes, jewelry, hotel bookings, stuff we never splurged on. I confronted her about the expenses. Oh, just treating myself, she said, brushing it off with a laugh. But her eyes, they darted away too quickly. I was trapped in a bad dream, watching the woman I married slip away into a life I didn't recognize. Each passing day twisted the knife a bit more, leaving me to wonder where we went wrong. But deep down, I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. The truth was coming, ready or not. You've got mail, the investigator's message read, as if it were some normal update. But what I saw next was far from normal. Photos of my wife, laughing and cozying up with some slick-haired guy, at a place that definitely wasn't for business meetings. My stomach churned. This wasn't just late nights and fancy dinners anymore. Confrontation seemed like the next logical step. So I waited for her in the living room, photos laid out like a deck of Betrayal on the coffee table. When she walked in, her face went from surprise to fear in a heartbeat. Who was he? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Her response: a well-rehearsed lie. Just a colleague, nothing to worry about. Colleague, my foot. I wanted to believe her, but the photos screamed a different story. Next day, I found myself sitting across from a lawyer, a guy who looked like he'd seen too many broken marriages. What are my options? I asked, hoping there was some easy way out of this mess. He laid it out plain and simple. It wasn't going to be pretty or easy, but I had to protect what was mine. We talked finances, assets, everything that once symbolized our shared life. Now just bargaining chips in a game of betrayal. Just when I thought things couldn't get messy, she dropped another bomb. I've got a business trip this weekend, she announced casually over breakfast. My gut screamed lies. The timing was too perfect, too convenient. Sure, I replied, keeping my suspicions to myself. Meanwhile, I had my investigator on speed dial. The pie's update wasn't a shocker. She's at a resort, he informed me. Sun, sand, and probably a lot more with her colleague. No business conference, no late-night meetings, just a weekend getaway on our dime. The pieces of the puzzle were fitting together, forming a picture I couldn't stand to look at. There I was, stuck in a plot twist of my own life. The woman I thought I knew was living a double life. Each revelation was like a blow, knocking the wind out of me. But I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. It was time to rewrite the script, even if it meant the end of us. The moment you start moving money out of a joint account, you know things have gone south. Real south. That's where I found myself, in a dimly lit bank, feeling like a character out of a heist movie. I was shifting assets, making sure I wasn't left high and dry. Felt underhanded, but then again, so was everything happening in my life. Just when I thought I was alone in this mess, I got a call. Her voice was shaky, yet there was a strange solidarity between us. It was her lover's wife. He's planning to leave me, she spilled, her words laced with betrayal. Turns out, I wasn't the only one blindsided. The enemy of my enemy could be a friend, or at least an ally in this twisted game. Digging deeper, I hit a revelation. Mr. Smooth Operator, my wife's lover, wasn't the wealthy entrepreneur he pretended to be. He was just another hustler looking for a good score. I almost laughed. My wife, with all her sophistication, had fallen for a con. The irony wasn't lost on me. So there we were, the scorned spouses plotting over coffee. It was surreal, teaming up with her to expose our cheating partners. We needed something dramatic, unmistakable. Let's crash their little love fest, she suggested. I couldn't help but smirk. It was bold, brash, and just what this situation called for. The night of the showdown felt like stepping onto a movie set. We timed it perfectly, walking into the restaurant just as they cozied up, lost in their little world. The look on their faces when they saw us, priceless. My wife's eyes were wide-mouthed agape. Her lover? He looked like he'd seen a ghost. The scene that unfolded was something out of a reality TV show. Voices raised, accusations flying, the whole restaurant watching. My wife tried to play it off, but her words were empty, hollow. Her lover, all charm gone, was a stuttering mess. The truth was out, naked for all to see. Walking out of that restaurant, I felt a weird mix of triumph and emptiness. We'd exposed them, sure, but what did we really win? Our marriages were in shambles, our partners revealed as strangers. It was a victory, all right, but one that tasted a lot like ash. The night she came back, it was like a storm hit our house. My wife, once the picture of composure, was a mess of fury and embarrassment. Her eyes were wild, her voice a mix of anger and disbelief. How could you embarrass me like that? She yelled, pacing like a caged animal. The irony of her words almost made me laugh. Almost. Morning brought a cold silence. Over breakfast, words unspoken, I slid the divorce papers across the table. They landed with a thud heavier than any word I could muster. Her hands trembled as she picked them up, her eyes not meeting mine. The finality of that moment hung in the air, thick and unyielding. Her plea was a whisper of desperation. Can't we try again? But it was too late. The woman I once loved was a stranger. Her words empty echoes of a past long gone. No, I said, my voice steady. It's over. I saw something break in her then. A final realization that there was no going back. The divorce proceedings were a blur of legal jargon and cold formalities. But when her affair came to light, the murmurs in the courtroom said it all. Her reputation, once spotless, now tainted with whispers and sideways glances. She sat there, shrinking under the weight of every judgmental stare. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But life wasn't done with her yet. The scandal spilled over into her professional life. She was a high flyer, her career as pristine as her public image used to be. But not anymore. Word got out, and the company she'd poured her heart into showed her the door. Bad for business, they said. She tried to fight it, but what chance did she have? Her affair had become more famous than any of her accomplishments. Watching her world crumble, I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge or justice. It was a tragedy, two lives unraveling from a single thread of betrayal. As much as I wanted to hate her, to revel in her downfall, I couldn't. Because once upon a time she was my everything. And now we were both nothing but memories in the ruins of what used to be. It was like watching a house of cards collapse, slow and painful. The news came one morning, almost as a footnote in the mess that had become our lives. Her lover, the man for whom she risked it all, returned to his wife. Just like that, he slipped back into his old life, leaving her stranded in the wreckage of their affair. She called me voice cracking, looking for some kind of solace or understanding. But what was there to say? We were past words, past any kind of comfort. The day of the settlement was surreal. The house we had turned into a home, the car we road tripped in, the savings we had built together, all mine. The gavel came down, and with it, the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. She walked away with barely enough to start over. A part of me wanted to feel victorious, but victory shouldn't feel this hollow. Moving day for her was a quiet affair. I watched from the window as she loaded her life into a rental truck, each box a piece of the world we had built. Her new place, a far cry from the home we shared, was small, unassuming. It was a stark reminder of how far she had fallen, from lavish dinners and designer clothes to counting pennies for rent. I thought her friends would stick by her, but I was wrong. One by one, they turned their backs, choosing to side with me. Maybe they were never really her friends to begin with. She tried to reach out, to salvage what was left of her social life. But it was like reaching into a void. No one wanted to associate with the woman who had so publicly fallen from grace. Her financial struggles were the talk of the town. Credit card debts, unpaid bills, the glamorous lifestyle she once flaunted was now her albatross. I'd hear snippets from mutual acquaintances, each tale more pitiful than the last. She was juggling jobs, trying to keep her head above water. The woman who once spent without a second thought was now drowning in a sea of debt. In the quiet of my now too large house, I couldn't help but reflect. We had loved, laughed, and dreamed under this roof. Now it was just a building echoing with memories of a life that was no more. She was out there struggling, fighting for every inch of her new life. And here I was, surrounded by the ghosts of our past, wondering if winning was worth the cost. Life has a way of coming at you fast, especially when you're not looking. It was a casual conversation, nothing special, but the news hit me harder than I expected. She was working herself to the bone, juggling multiple jobs just to scrape by. The image of her, once so poised and confident, now hustling day and night, was hard to shake off. I heard she was reaching out, trying to mend fences with old friends, but they wanted no part of it. The doors that used to swing wide open for her were now firmly shut. People she considered close, friends she had laughed and celebrated with, now turned their backs. It was a loneliness I wouldn't wish on anyone, not even her. The stress was taking its toll on her, physically and mentally. Rumors had it that her health was in decline. I pictured her, once vibrant and full of life, now worn down by the weight of her choices. It's strange how life can take such drastic turns, how quickly health can deteriorate under the burden of stress and heartache. Meanwhile, I was trying to move on, to find some semblance of happiness in the chaos that had become my life. I started dating, meeting someone who brought a semblance of normalcy. It felt good being out, laughing and enjoying company again. We went to places, unafraid of who saw us. It was liberating, yet somewhere deep down, a twinge of guilt lingered. Then came the night we all ended up at the same restaurant. The odds must have been astronomical, but there we were. I was with my date, laughing over a glass of wine when I saw her. She tried to hide it, but I could see the pain in her eyes, the way her smile faltered when she saw us together. She looked smaller somehow, diminished and fragile. For a moment our eyes met, and I saw a glimpse of the woman I used to know. It was a look that stayed with me, haunting in its sadness. That night, lying awake, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. The choices we made, the paths we took, all leading to this moment. There she was, struggling to keep her head above water, while I was out trying to fill the void she left. We were two sides of the same coin, spinning out of control, caught in a dance of our own making. It was a sobering thought, a realization of the price of our decisions, the cost of the lives we chose. There's something about hitting rock bottom that strips away all pretenses. The news came to me like a cold slap. Her own parents had turned their backs on her. They blamed her for the failed marriage, for the scandal, for everything. It was a harsh sentence from the very people who should have been her safety net. But then again, betrayal does strange things to people, even to parents. Amidst this storm, she reached out to me. Her voice was different. Not the confident, assertive tone I was used to, but something frail, almost scared. She wanted to meet, talk, maybe find a way to mend things. But how could I? Too much had happened, too many words had been spoken, and too many wounds inflicted. I couldn't just erase it all. So I told her no as gently as I could. The line went silent, and in that silence, I felt a chapter closing, one that would never be reopened. It wasn't long before I heard she was selling her things. A mutual friend let it slip, voice low and uncomfortable. She's selling off her stuff, man. Furniture, clothes, even her jewelry. It painted a grim picture. The once proud woman I knew, now hawking her possessions just to stay afloat. It was like watching someone drown in slow motion. Then came the eviction. I didn't hear it from her, of course. News like that doesn't get shared, it gets whispered in hushed tones. She'd fallen behind on rent, too far to catch up. So they kicked her out just like that. The thought of her, alone and desperate, being forced out of yet another home was jarring. I wondered where she would go, what she would do. The answer wasn't long in coming. Another slice of gossip from the grapevine. She had moved into a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. A place where dreams go to die, where the forgotten and the lost find their refuge. The image of her in that dingy, cramped room was a stark contrast to the life we once shared. It was a fall from grace like no other. A descent into a kind of despair I couldn't even begin to fathom. Lying in my bed that night, in the quiet of the house that once echoed with our laughter, I couldn't shake off a feeling of profound sadness. It wasn't just about her downfall, or about the bitter end of our marriage. It was about how life can take such unexpected, tragic turns. How the person you once loved, the one you thought you knew, can become a stranger, struggling to survive in a world that's turned its back on them. It was a sobering reminder of how fragile our lives really are. How quickly everything can change, leaving nothing but memories and what-ifs. Life's got a cruel way of spreading news you don't want to hear. It started as whispers, then grew into full-blown rumors. Word on the street was she'd taken up jobs that raised eyebrows, the kind you don't list on a resume. It was hard to digest, thinking of her, once so proud and dignified, now scraping the bottom of the barrel. Then fate, with its twisted sense of humor, put her right in my path. I was at the store minding my own business when I saw her. It took me a moment to even recognize her. The woman I once knew with her perfect hair and flawless style was gone. In her place was someone who looked like they'd been chewed up and spat out by life. Her eyes, once so bright and full of fire, were now dull and tired. It was like seeing a ghost, a reminder of a past life. She saw me too. There was this moment, just a split second, when our eyes met. Time stood still and then it all came crashing down. She approached me, hesitantly, as if she wasn't sure of her welcome. "I need help," she said, her voice a mix of desperation and shame. It was a plea, raw and unfiltered. But what could I do? Too much had happened, too many bridges burned. So I did the only thing I felt I could. I walked away. The look in her eyes as I turned my back. I'll probably remember that for the rest of my life. I thought that was the end of it, but life had more in store. A mutual friend called me one evening. "She's in the hospital," he said, his voice heavy. My heart sank. It wasn't surprise or shock I felt, but a deep, unsettling sadness. The details were sketchy, but it was clear. Her health had taken a nosedive. Maybe it was the stress, the hard living, or a bit of both. But she was down and it sounded serious. I wrestled with the idea of visiting her. Part of me felt like I should, for old time's sake, for the love we once shared. But another part, the part that still felt the sting of betrayal, the hurt of abandonment, held me back. It was a tug of war, memories against grievances. In the end, the grievances won. I didn't go. I told myself it was for the best, that there was nothing I could do, that I had to move on. But deep down, I wondered if it was just an excuse, a way to shield myself from facing the ruins of our shared past. Lying in bed that night, I couldn't escape the thoughts, the what-ifs. What if I had gone to see her? What if I had offered help at the store? What if things had been different? It's funny how life works. You think you've moved on, but then it throws a curveball that sends you spiraling back into the past. There I was, in a comfortable home, with a life slowly piecing itself back together, yet haunted by the ghost of a relationship that had once meant the world to me. It was a chapter that was supposed to be closed, but some stories, it seems, refuse to end quietly. It's strange how life can pivot on a single moment. She was discharged from the hospital, left to face a world that had turned its back on her. No home, no family willing to take her in. I heard about it in passing, the news delivered with a shake of the head and a cluck of the tongue. It was like she'd become a cautionary tale, a ghost story told in hushed tones. Determined to claw her way back, she started looking for any opportunity to rebuild what was lost. But opportunities were like mirages, always out of reach. The job market can be cruel, especially to those with a tarnished reputation. It didn't help that her skills were rusty, her confidence shattered. Then a glimmer of hope, a former colleague, someone from her past life, reached out. The job was nothing to brag about, far below her qualifications and experience. But it was something. So she took it, donning a uniform and a plastic smile, serving fast food to faces that sometimes recognized her. It was a fall from grace, but she faced it with a resilience that I couldn't help but acknowledge, even from a distance. Life has a way of throwing curveballs, and hers came in the form of her former lover reaching out. Maybe he was looking for redemption, or maybe just a familiar face in his own sea of troubles. But she turned him away. There was a strength in that rejection, a sign that she was still fighting, still trying to find her way on her own terms. Meanwhile, my own life was taking a different turn. I got engaged and it made the local headlines. A new chapter for me, but for her, it was a reminder of everything that had slipped through her fingers. They said she saw the news and just broke down. Right there in the middle of her shift. It was a public display of private pain. A moment of vulnerability that left her exposed and raw. The downward spiral continued, and soon, she was a shadow wandering the streets, lost in a world that seemed to have no place for her. People saw her, but they didn't really see her. She was just another face among the city's forgotten. Then, one night, the inevitable happened. She was found, disoriented and scared, her mind a maze of confusion and despair. The authorities had no choice but to intervene. They placed her in a shelter, a safe haven for those who've hit rock bottom. The final image that reached me was a punch to the gut. A photograph of her in that shelter, holding an old photo of us. It was from a time when smiles were easy, and love was something we thought would never fade. A single tear rolled down her cheek, tracing a path of regret and realization. It was a picture that spoke 1,000 words about choices and consequences, about love lost and lives changed. As I sat there staring at that image, I realized that this was more than just the end of her story. It was a reflection of the fragility of life, of how easily happiness can slip away. It was a reminder of the consequences of our actions, of the scars we leave on others and ourselves. And in that moment, I understood that while our paths had diverged, our story would always be intertwined, a bittersweet symphony of love, loss, and the lessons. Today I confronted her, and the aftermath was something I had never witnessed before. It was an intense experience that left me shaken. I want to clarify that the following account was written on the day it happened, so my emotions might not perfectly align with the comments I made in the past few days. Please understand that I have a lot to process, and as a result I may not be available to respond for a while. This incident has deeply affected me, and I hope to never endure something similar again. Confronting her today was undoubtedly the most challenging task I have ever faced. I find myself experiencing occasional tremors as if my nerves are on edge. She left today, whether it was for work or to see Chris, I'm uncertain. I attempted to check her location, but either she had disabled it, or my phone was malfunctioning. I lacked the means to track her down and address the situation. The anticipated confrontation is scheduled for later this week, but I couldn't afford to wait any longer. I needed to confront her before she had a chance to come up with any more elaborate fabrications. As I heard the sound of the garage door opening, I quickly activated the camera. She entered the room completely unaware of what was about to happen. I urged her to take a seat, trying to hide my own apprehension as her expression transformed into that of a deer caught in headlights. Finally, she complied and asked me what was troubling me. I asked her directly, "Why don't you just tell me?" She feigned ignorance, but I could sense that she was aware she had been discovered. With a hint of desperation, she repeated her question, asking me once more what was troubling me. Choosing a slightly different approach, I inquired about her relationship with Chris, urging her to be honest. She denied any involvement, claiming she hadn't heard from him. Instead of confronting her head-on, I decided to shift gears. I expressed my discomfort with her working alongside him, explaining that it was something I couldn't overlook or move past in our relationship. To my surprise, she immediately acquiesced, her agreement apparent in her demeanor. Nervously, she inquired about my sudden change of heart and the unusual way I was behaving. Shaking my head, I tried to articulate my perspective, expressing that I had initially wanted to be understanding, but had grown uncomfortable due to unsettling vibes I had sensed from him. I made it clear that I preferred they didn't communicate. She insisted that Chris held no significance in her life anymore, emphasizing that her happiness stemmed solely from witnessing the book's completion. I informed her that he essentially took advantage of her, and she is far too forgiving considering the situation warrants legal action. Surprisingly, she agrees with me. At this point, she's likely contemplating ending her relationship with Chris as soon as she finds an opportunity. However, I then revealed to her that the entire ordeal has caused me immense stress, prompting me to take a week off from work. I informed her that during our conversation, I spoke with my ex, who graciously agreed to take care of our son for the weekend, allowing us to go to Vegas together. That's why I had a lengthy conversation with my ex the other day, discussing the logistics of her looking after our son. Or at least, that's the explanation I want her to believe. However, My attempt to mislead her is abruptly interrupted when she informs me that our Vegas trip has been canceled today due to unforeseen circumstances. The conversation from here on goes like this, paraphrased, of course. Me. It got canceled last month. Her. No. He told us today because he wasn't sure whether or not it was off until today. Me. I know it got canceled last month. Her. What are you doing? Why are you telling me you want to go, and then telling me it's canceled? I don't get what you're doing. Me. It was canceled last month. What were you going to do if I didn't ask about it? Her. You're freaking me out. Me. It was actually canceled today. So what were you planning to do? Or what are you accusing me of? How long have you and Chris been back together? Or have we not done anything? Did he tell you that we are you and me? Please don't lie to me. I don't want to go through the painful task of reading out all the hurtful things he texted. It almost made me sick when I did it the first time. I can't believe you would do this. Her. I love you. I'm sorry. He's been texting me a lot lately and saying a lot of messed up stuff. And I don't know how to handle it. It was canceled today. Me. What were you going to doing? Or what are you accusing me of? Me. How long have you and Chris been back together? Or we haven't done anything. Did he tell you we were? Me. Don't lie to me. I don't want to read off everything he texted. It almost made me throw up doing it the first time. I can't believe you do this. Her. I love you. I'm sorry. He's been texting me a lot lately and saying a lot of messed up stuff. And I don't know how to deal with it. It's part of the reason why we broke up. I told you that I knew I shouldn't have responded to his messages. It's always drama with him. All his messages were fine. But he started with the missing me stuff again. Like always, I was going to tell you he wanted you to come home and kiss me after you were going down on it. I read your messages. I saw them in your email and in your text. You're cheating on me. And I want you out of this house today. Or what? I'm not cheating on you. If you don't want him around, I'll tell him to get lost. But honey, I'm not cheating on you. Is that what he told you? He's lying. Me, stop it. I told you I went in your messages on your phone. You're going to get your stuff and you're going to go to your parents. I made copies of your emails and screenshots from your texts. I refuse to conceal the content of your conversations any longer. If you persist in deceiving me directly, I will take the necessary steps to reveal it. Our relationship is over. Please collect your belongings. Despite everything that has transpired, I must acknowledge that she made an attempt to feign ignorance and continue with the falsehoods. However, her facade eventually crumbled under the weight of the evidence as I handed her the printed copies of your text exchanges. As she glanced at them briefly, her emotions overwhelmed her, and she broke down into inconsolable tears, displaying a level of devastation I had never witnessed before. Initially, I experienced a brief moment of sympathy towards her. She expressed remorse, claiming that the situation had spiraled out of control, and she wished to put an end to it. However, she revealed that her partner had become possessive and resorted to threats of exposing their relationship if she tried to break things off. I pointed out that none of these details were evident in their text conversations, emphasizing that she was continuing to deceive me. She had planned to spend the upcoming weekend with her partner, but she suddenly declared that it was over between them and assured me that she would make sure he ceased to be a part of her life. She assured me adamantly that she would sever all ties with him, vowing never to engage in conversation with him again. Meanwhile, I informed her that I had taken steps to consult with a lawyer, and the divorce papers would be prepared in the near future. Upon hearing this, she erupted in outburst, repeatedly exclaiming, "You've been talking to a lawyer." The intensity of her reaction escalated to a point where I felt concerned for my safety, and I contemplated contacting the authorities in an attempt to defuse the situation. I urged her to calm down and reassured her that our interaction was being recorded by a surveillance camera. Subsequently, she continued to experience a profound emotional breakdown, appearing unrecognizable compared to anyone I had encountered before. She persistently accused me of orchestrating a meticulous plan, smiling deceitfully as I supposedly plotted everything. In response to each accusation, I reiterated the evidence of her own actions, pointing out how she had been scheming and displaying a false demeanor towards me while engaging in questionable activities. Attempting to make sense of the situation, I questioned why she would inflict this pain upon us. Initially, she struggled to provide a coherent response, leaving me without a clear understanding of her motivations. She attempted to explain that it was merely a meaningless period of enjoyment, to which I retorted with, "So you essentially destroyed our relationship for no valid reason. And that's wonderful." As time went on, she became somewhat more subdued, leaving me uncertain whether her words were genuine or an attempt to inflict pain. However, it became apparent that she deeply regretted her actions with him, referring to him as her soulmate. I was overcome with intense emotions, almost to the point of wanting to destroy objects in my surroundings. I couldn't help but question why she hadn't chosen him over me from the start. I would have been more understanding if she had explained that she wanted to distance herself from him due to concerns about her family's disapproval and the negative impression it would leave. It appears that her family held unfavorable opinions of him as well. Additionally, she emphasized that she could never truly be with him, as her ex-partner and daughter would strongly oppose such a decision. Returning to him was never a realistic option for her. Afterward, she expressed remorse and seemed astonished by my resolute stance on the matter. She admitted to the gravity of her mistake and pleaded for a chance to make amends, promising to do whatever it took to repair the situation. In response, I firmly declined her offer. She then asserted that we wouldn't be getting a divorce, believing that she could make things right. However, I informed her that there was nothing she could do to regain my forgiveness. I made it clear that I would never forgive her for what had transpired. Surprisingly, she displayed astonishment in the face of my unwavering stance. I informed her of my actions, revealing that I had recently opened an account in a separate bank and transferred half of the funds from our joint account into it. The remaining balance was hers, and she had the option to retrieve it herself or allow me to handle the matter. I made it clear that the joint account would be closed. She simply nodded in understanding and suggested that we would likely need to visit the bank together to complete the closure process. Subsequently, she began calmly packing her clothes, occasionally shedding tears and curiously interspersing threats that nothing should go missing. I shrugged it off and calmly suggested that she document the condition in which she left her belongings and her daughter's belongings. This way, when she returned, she would be able to see for herself. I assured her that I hadn't touched anything. Her parents were informed, and they were astounded by the situation. They expressed their surprise that Chris was even involved and spent time apologizing to me. Shortly after she left my house the following day, my ex-spouse bombarded my phone with numerous texts expressing love and apologies, insisting that we could resolve the issues. It got to the point where I considered getting rid of my phone altogether. I contemplated switching off my phone, but since my ex-wife had custody of our son, I felt it was necessary to keep it on in case of any emergencies or last-minute changes when he was returning home. Instead, I found myself responding to her text messages by sending screenshots of the most unpleasant parts of our conversation, choosing to remain silent. To my surprise, my ex eventually arrived with our son, and even brought dinner from my favorite Chinese restaurant. When I broke the news to my son, I didn't provide him with all the details, but he directly asked if his mother had cheated on me. The suddenness of the situation led him to make that assumption, and without delving into specifics, I confirmed his intuition. They stayed with me for a while before heading back home, but ever since then, it feels like we've all been in a state of limbo, trying our best to maintain some semblance of normalcy within the house. As I write this, a couple of days have passed, and I'm about to head to the gym before meeting with my lawyers. This situation has become incredibly overwhelming, with new developments unfolding at a rapid pace. I could spend hours typing and still not capture all the updates regarding my soon-to-be ex-husband. He is scheduled to pick up his daughter's belongings, and I will do my best to explain to her that she can always reach out to me if she needs anything. As for contemplating whether to disclose to her ex-husband about her involvement with Chris, it seems like a futile endeavor. It wouldn't achieve much in the grand scheme of things. Anyway, I've already fought and won the first battle in this ordeal, but there's still much more to come. Given the circumstances, it's hard to define winning, but I've managed to navigate through this challenging situation as best as I can. Although there's a part of me that desires to confront Chris, I recognize that it would only drain my time and energy, accomplishing very little. It would be wiser to focus on my work, hit the gym, or find a meaningful way to express my gratitude to my ex-wife, who has been an absolute MVP, supporting me throughout this entire ordeal. Well, that's all I can share for now. Thank you for listening to the story to the end, and if you like it, please support us with a like as well as subscribe to our channel. Write in the comments what you Betrayal has a taste, bitter and lingering. I found that out the day I came home early. You see, I'd been feeling off, like something in my life was out of sync. That day, the universe decided to show me what it was. I walked into my own house to find Sarah, my wife of 7 years, in Mark's arms. Mark, her smooth-talking coworker, whose only good trait was his ability to hide his snake-like nature. The shock hit me like a freight train. There they were in our living room, tangled up in what used to be our favorite blanket. I remember how time seemed to slow down as I stood there, the image burning into my memory. Sarah's eyes met mine, wide with guilt. Mark, the coward, couldn't even look at me. I didn't say a word. What was there to say? I walked out, the sound of Sarah's pleading trailing behind me. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was swift and brutal. Sarah left, choosing Mark and his flashy lifestyle over our years together. She didn't just take her belongings, she took nearly everything we'd built together. Savings, investments, even the fancy china we got on our wedding day, all gone. I was left with an echo of a life we had shared, in a house that suddenly seemed too big and too empty. The struggle that came after was like wading through a swamp. I had to start from scratch. Finding a new job wasn't easy. Who wants to hire the guy who just got left for another man? But I managed to land a gig at a tech startup. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. I moved into a modest apartment, the kind where you could touch both walls if you stretched your arms out. But it was mine, and it was not filled with memories of Sarah. One day, I was grabbing a coffee when I overheard a conversation. Two guys were talking about Mark and Sarah. They mentioned a big house, fancy cars, and trips to places I couldn't even pronounce. A pang of something hit me, anger maybe, or just plain old jealousy. It was hard to tell. That's when Alex stepped in. Alex, my best friend since college, who'd stuck by me through this mess. He proposed a trip to clear my head. Let's go hiking, he said. Get away from all this drama. He was right. I needed a break from the whispers, the pitying looks, and the empty apartment that echoed with what used to be. So we planned a weekend getaway, somewhere remote and wild. A place where cell service was a myth, and the only drama was whether we'd run out of beer. As we packed our gear into Alex's beat-up car, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. Maybe it was the open road ahead, or just the fact that I was doing anything other than moping around. I was ready to leave it all behind, at least for a weekend. Little did I know, this trip would be more than just a distraction. It was the start of something new. A path I never expected to take. You wouldn't believe it. The way fate likes to play its twisted games. There I was, deep in the mountains with Alex, trying to forget the world. The air was crisp, the sky a perfect blue. Not a single reminder of my old life in sight. That's until we decided to grab a meal at this fancy resort nearby. A little treat to ourselves, you know? And guess who we see sipping a cocktail by the pool? Sarah. Yeah, my ex-wife in all her glory, looking like she just stepped out of a magazine. She saw us too. There was this split second where her eyes gave it all away, the surprise, the panic. But she masked it quickly, replaced it with that practiced, plastic smile. Came over. All breezy and light, like we were just old friends bumping into each other. She was all dolled up, dressed to the nines, flashing her new expensive jewelry. It was surreal seeing her there, acting like she owned the place. But under all that, I could tell something was off. Her eyes didn't match her smile. They were tired, maybe even a bit scared. But she played her part well, showing off about this lavish lifestyle she and Mark were leading. I kept my cool, just nodded along while Alex gave me these "can you believe this?" looks. We couldn't get out of there fast enough. Back on the trail, Alex couldn't stop talking about it. She's not happy, man, he kept saying. I didn't want to think about it. It was her choice, her life now. When we got back, life kicked back into gear. Work was waiting, and guess what? I landed a promotion. More responsibility, better pay, it was exactly what I needed. Felt like I was finally moving forward, you know? Then out of the blue, Sarah calls me. Her voice was different, shaky. Said she was unhappy that she missed us, missed our old life. It hit me like a ton of bricks, but what was I supposed to do? She made her choice. I told her I had to go, that there was a project waiting on my desk. It wasn't a lie. Work had become my refuge. A place where I didn't have to think about broken vows and lost years. I dove into it headfirst, trying to drown out her words, her voice. I was done being the fallback guy, the safety net. It was time to rebuild on my terms. So I ignored her calls, her texts. Each new message left unread. A tiny victory. Sarah was part of a past I was trying to leave behind. I had a new role at work, new challenges. I needed to focus on that, on me. It was time to move on for real this time. Talk about a day that flips your world upside down. It was a regular Tuesday, buried in paperwork and endless emails. Then, out of nowhere, Sarah shows up at my office. Yeah, the same Sarah who left me for Mr. High and Mighty Mark. She looked different, eyes red, a bit disheveled. Not the polished image she loved to show off. She was there, in the middle of my workplace, begging for forgiveness, tears and all. Man, was I conflicted. Part of me wanted to comfort her. The old part that remembered us before it all went south. But the other part, the part that got dragged through the mud, stayed cold. I kept my distance, told her this wasn't the place or time. She left, but the echo of her visit lingered like a bad smell. Later, over coffee, a coworker mentioned something about Mark that caught me off guard. Apparently, the guy was knee-deep in some illegal business stuff. Fraud. Money laundering. The works. I couldn't believe it. And Sarah? She was in the dark about it all. She jumped ship for a life that was built on a house of cards. In the midst of this chaos, there was Emily. We'd been working on a project together for a while. She was sharp, funny, and had this way of making even the dullest meetings bearable. We started grabbing lunch together, casual at first. But soon those lunches turned into dinners, and dinners turned into something more. Emily was different. She wasn't about flashy things or high drama. She was real, grounded. She listened when I talked about my struggles, offered a smile that seemed to make the worst days better. It was refreshing being with someone who valued me for who I was, not what I could offer. Dating again felt strange at first, like wearing a suit that didn't quite fit. But with Emily it was easy. She had this way of looking at life, a positive spin on everything. And she believed in me, pushed me to aim higher at work, to take on challenges I'd normally shy away from. So there I was, caught between my past with Sarah, a present that was tangled in rumors of crime and deceit, and a budding future with Emily. It was like standing at a crossroad, each path leading to a different destination. And let me tell you, the road I was starting to lean towards, it didn't include Sarah, tears or not. Just when you think you've seen it all, life throws a curveball that makes you question everything. Sarah's attempts to win me back were turning from sad to downright desperate. She'd call at odd hours, send messages filled with memories and regrets. I was trying to be sympathetic, but patience wears thin, especially when you're trying to move on. Meanwhile, things with Emily were getting serious. She was like a breath of fresh air, making me see a future I hadn't dared to imagine after Sarah left. We were connecting on a level one hadn't experienced before. So we planned a trip together. A week in the mountains, hiking, exploring, and just enjoying each other's company. It was exactly what I needed. A chance to strengthen this new bond away from the daily grind. Now here's the kicker. While we were away, enjoying nature and each other's company, Mark got arrested. Yeah, the same Mark that Sarah left me for. Turns out he wasn't just a smooth talker, he was a criminal. Fraud, embezzlement, you name it, he was involved. It was all over the news, but up in the mountains, Emily and I were blissfully unaware. We got back to a world turned upside down. Sarah was in the eye of the storm, left high and dry by Mark's criminal escapades. Financially ruined, socially ostracized, she'd lost everything chasing that glittering life Mark had promised. I felt a pang of something, pity maybe? But it was mixed with a sense of vindication. Karma, as they say, has no menu, you get served what you deserve. The irony of it all was not lost on me. There I was, enjoying the simple things in life with Emily, while Sarah's world, built on lies and deceit, crumbled. It was a stark reminder of how different paths can lead to different destinations. Emily and I, we talked about it, of course. She was the kind of person who could find a lesson in everything, a silver lining in the darkest clouds. She said it was a reminder to cherish honesty and integrity, to value the real things in life. And she was right. As we unpacked our bags, putting away our camping gear, I realized how far I'd come from the day Sarah walked out. Life has a funny way of balancing things out. There I was, starting fresh, building something real and meaningful, while Sarah was back at square one, maybe even further back. I couldn't help but think about the choices we make, the paths we choose and where they lead us. It was a chapter in my life I was ready to close, turning the page to something new, something better with Emily by my side. Life's a crazy ride, isn't it? One day you're up, the next you're scraping rock bottom. That's what happened to Sarah. We got back from our trip, all relaxed and sun-kissed, only to find out she'd been evicted. Yeah, Sarah, once living the high life, was now on the streets. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I mean, this was the woman I'd shared a life with, now homeless because of choices she made. I won't lie, it tugged at my heartstrings. But then I'd remember all the hurt, the betrayal, and I'd force that guilt back down. Emily noticed, of course. She has this sixth sense for reading emotions. But we were building something good, something healthy, and I wasn't about to let Sarah's mess tarnish it. It got worse, though. Sarah's friends, the ones who'd egged her on to chase the high life with Mark, turned their backs on her. Fair weather friends, right? It's sad watching someone you once loved become a ghost of their former self, all alone. Then Sarah started showing up. Yeah, at my usual spots, the coffee shop near work, the park where I jog on weekends. It was like she was haunting me. A living reminder of a past I was trying hard to move on from. She'd ask for help, money, a place to stay. It was heart-wrenching, but every time I saw her, I'd remember the pain she caused, and it made it easier to say no. But Emily, being the kind-hearted soul she is, suggested we help her. Everyone deserves a second chance, she said. I admired her generosity, but it was too much. I couldn't bring myself to reach out to Sarah, not after everything. I told Emily it was a part of my life I needed to keep closed. She understood, or at least she tried to. I was torn, you know? Here was Emily, showing compassion to the woman who broke me, while I battled my conscience. But I had to protect what Emily and I were building. I couldn't drag her into the chaos that was Sarah's life. It's strange, feeling this mix of sympathy and resentment. Part of me wanted to help, but a bigger part was still healing from the scars Sarah left. I chose to focus on my life with Emily, on the future we were planning. It was hard, turning my back on someone I once loved, but sometimes, moving forward means leaving someone behind. So I kept my distance, focusing on my job, my relationship with Emily, trying to ignore the guilt that gnawed at me whenever I saw Sarah. Life, huh? Throws these curveballs, testing you, pushing you. But in the end, it's the choices we make that define us. And I had made mine. Life has a way of throwing you into a whirlwind when you least expect it. Just as I was hitting my stride, the universe decided to toss a curveball my way. It started with news about Sarah. Her health was taking a nosedive. Living on the streets, battling stress and who knows what else, it was taking a toll on her. It was hard to hear, even harder to process. This was someone I had loved, and now she was just a shadow struggling to survive. But amidst the chaos, there was a silver lining for me. Work was going great, better than great, actually. I landed another promotion, recognition for all the late nights and early mornings I'd put in. My career was soaring and it felt good, really good. It was like for every piece of bad news about Sarah, there was something positive happening in my life. Then the news came that Sarah had been arrested for shoplifting. Food essentials, basic stuff. It hit me hard. There she was, a woman who once had everything, now reduced to stealing to survive. Part of me wanted to rush to her aid, bail her out, do something. But another part, the part that still felt the sting of betrayal, held back. I wrestled with the decision, torn between the past and the present. Emily was a rock during this time, a sounding board for my conflicted emotions. We talked it through and I decided not to bail Sarah out. It was one of the toughest decisions I've ever made, but I had to think about my own well-being, our well-being. Speaking of Emily, things between us were getting serious, really serious. We decided to move in together, start planning a future. It was a big step, but it felt right. We found this cozy place, not too big, not too small, just perfect for the two of us. Moving in with her, I felt like I was finally closing a painful chapter and starting a fresh one, filled with hope and promise. In the midst of this, I couldn't help but reflect on how our lives had diverged so drastically. Here I was moving forward, building a life with Emily, while Sarah was lost, caught in a downward spiral. It was a stark reminder of how choices shape our paths, for better or worse. So as Emily and I unpacked boxes and started making the place our own, I allowed myself to feel hopeful, to believe in a future that was bright and full of possibilities. It was a new beginning, a chance to leave the past and its shadows behind and step into the light of a new day. The contrast between my world and Sarah's was stark, but it was a reminder of the journey I'd been on, the growth and the changes. It was time to embrace this new chapter, with Emily by my side. Life's a roller coaster, they say. You never know what's around the next bend. Take the day Sarah got released, for instance. I heard about it from Alex, who's somehow always in the know. She looked nothing like the Sarah I remembered, frail, broken, a shadow of her former self. It was a shock, to say the least. Then out of the blue she showed up at my doorstep. There she was, the woman who'd turned my life upside down, looking like she'd been through a storm. She was begging, pleading for another chance, tears streaming down her face. It was a heart-wrenching scene, but my heart had grown tough, resilient. I told her I'd moved on. It was the truth. Emily and I were building something special, and I couldn't let Sarah tear that down. It was a hard thing to say, watching her crumble right there on my porch, but some bridges once burnt can't be rebuilt. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, Jack entered the scene. This guy, a blast from Sarah's past, comes out of nowhere. Turns out he was her first love, the one who got away, the one she'd always talked about with that distant look in her eyes. He disappeared years ago, leaving her heartbroken. And now here he was back from the void. Jack's timing was like something out of a soap opera, showing up just as Sarah hit rock bottom. He had this mysterious air about him, like he carried secrets in his pockets. I didn't trust him, but Sarah, she seemed to light up around him, a flicker of the old Sarah shining through. It was a strange feeling watching them together. There was a part of me that felt relieved, like maybe Jack's return would give Sarah a new focus, a new reason to pull herself together. But another part of me was skeptical. People don't just show up out of the blue for no reason, especially not from someone's past like that. I kept my distance, watching this new chapter in Sarah's life unfold from afar. Emily and I, we had our own lives to live, our own future to build. But I couldn't help but keep an eye on the situation. Jack was an unknown variable, a piece of Sarah's past that had suddenly become a part of her present. As I watched them together, a mix of emotions churned inside me. There was a sense of closure, knowing that Sarah might have found someone from her past to connect with. Yet there was also this nagging feeling, a question of what Jack's real intentions were. It was a reminder that life is full of surprises, some good, some bad, and sometimes just downright confusing. Life's a funny thing, just when you think you've got it all figured out, it throws you a curveball. Take Sarah and Jack, for instance. Jack started showing up everywhere with Sarah, offering her the kind of support I hadn't seen in years. It was like he'd lit a spark in her that had long been extinguished. They were everywhere, laughing, holding hands, looking like a couple straight out of a rom-com. It should have made me happy, right? Seeing her getting back on her feet? But here's the kicker, I felt this weird twinge of jealousy. I know, crazy, right? After everything that had happened, after moving on with Emily, there I was feeling jealous. It's not like I wanted Sarah back, but seeing her with Jack so alive, it stirred up something old and familiar. I pushed those feelings down, though, tried to focus on my own life. Speaking of my life, things with Emily hit a bit of a snag. Nothing major, just the usual stuff couples go through when the honeymoon phase starts wearing off. Little arguments here and there, misunderstandings, the kind of things that remind you relationships are work. It was normal, I guess, but against the backdrop of Sarah's newfound happiness, it felt amplified. Then one day, out of the blue, Sarah comes up to me. We're at the same coffee shop, by pure coincidence. She's with Jack, all smiles and sunshine, and she thanks me. Yeah, thanks me for all the indirect help I'd given her. Said that hitting rock bottom was what she needed to find herself again, to reconnect with Jack. It was surreal hearing that from her, like I played a part in this script I didn't even know I was part of. It got me thinking about the paths we take in life. Here was Sarah, thanking me for a journey that had nearly broken me. And here I was, hitting a rough patch with Emily, wondering if every relationship was doomed to follow the same rocky road. The rest of the day was a blur. I couldn't shake off the encounter with Sarah. It made me reflect on my own life, my relationship with Emily. We had something good, something real, but it needed nurturing care. It wasn't going to be all sunshine and rainbows, but maybe that was okay. Maybe that's what made it real, made it worth the effort. I went home that night, determined to work through the rough patch with Emily. Life's too short to dwell on what could have been, on old flames and faded memories. It's the here and now that counts, the path you're on, the people you choose to walk it with. Sarah had found her way back to Jack, And I had Emily, with all our imperfections and challenges. It was time to focus on that, to build something lasting, something real. Life might be unpredictable, but it's the surprises that make it worth living. Life's a maze, and sometimes you find yourself at a dead end, forced to backtrack. That's how I felt when things got rocky with Emily. My mind was a mess, a tangle of emotions I couldn't quite sort out. The whole thing with Sarah and Jack, it had thrown me for a loop. Emily sensed it, and tension simmered between us, a silent undercurrent in our daily lives. Then the bombshell dropped. Jack, Mr. Knight in shining armor, turned out to be a con man. The guy was using Sarah, playing her for what little she had left after Mark's debacle. When the truth came out, it was like watching a car crash in slow motion. Sarah was devastated, betrayed yet again. It was painful to see, even from the sidelines. That revelation stirred something in me. Guilt, maybe? I couldn't help but feel responsible in a twisted way. There I was, moving on, building a life with Emily, while Sarah's world crumbled around her. It made me question my choices, my path. Was I just lucky, or had I made the right decisions? Amidst this chaos, an opportunity landed in my lap. A major project abroad, the kind of career move people dream of. It was big, exciting, and terrifying all at once. But Emily, she was all for it. "It'll be good for us," she said. "A fresh start, away from all this drama." She was right, as usual. We needed something to shake us out of this rut, to rekindle the spark that had brought us together. But the decision wasn't easy. Uprooting our lives, stepping into the unknown, it was a leap of faith. Sarah's situation weighed on me too. Despite everything, I felt a pull, a sense of responsibility for someone I'd once promised to cherish till death do us part. But life had other plans, and those vows were long broken. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. This opportunity could be the fresh start Emily and I needed. A chance to focus on us, to build something new, away from the ghosts of my past. It was a chance to prove to Emily, and to myself, that I was committed to our future, to moving forward together. So after long nights of discussion, weighing pros and cons, we made the decision. We'd take the leap, embark on this new adventure. It felt like a weight had been lifted, a path cleared. I could see a future bright and promising on the horizon. As for Sarah, I hoped she'd find her way, just like I was trying to find mine. Life's a series of choices, each leading us down different paths. Sometimes those paths cross, intertwine, and then diverge again. It was time to embrace my path, with Emily by my side, stepping into a new chapter, a world of possibilities waiting to be discovered. Just when you think you've got your life on track, the past has a way of sneaking up on you. That's what happened the day before Emily and I were set to leave the country. My phone buzzed, and there was Sarah's name flashing on the screen. She was reaching out, probably for the last time. Her voice message was filled with desperation, a plea for help, for connection, anything. But I couldn't do it, couldn't open that door again. It was the hardest thing, ignoring that message. Part of me wanted to help, out of old loyalty maybe. But another part knew that some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. I was starting a new life with Emily, and I couldn't drag the ghosts of my past along with us. So, I made the tough choice to leave without responding to Sarah's plea. The next day, as Emily and I packed our last boxes, there was this sense of finality, of leaving behind more than just a city. I caught a glimpse of Sarah from my window. She was wandering the streets, looking lost, a mere shadow of the woman she once was. It was a heart-wrenching sight, a stark reminder of how far we'd both come from the days we shared together. But it was her path, her choices that led her there, just as mine had led me here. The taxi ride to the airport was quiet, reflective. Emily held my hand, and in spoken support. She knew what was going through my mind, the turmoil of leaving Sarah in such a state. But she also understood the need to move forward, to not get pulled back into a whirlpool of past mistakes. As our plane took off, leaving the city and Sarah behind, I looked out the window, lost in thought. It was like watching the final scene of a movie, where the protagonist leaves it all behind, ready for a new adventure. Emily and I, we were starting a new chapter, in a new country with new challenges and opportunities. It was exciting, scary, and liberating all at once. But as I watched the city shrink into the distance, my thoughts lingered on Sarah. Her life, once intertwined with mine, now a cautionary tale of loss and regret. It made me think about the consequences of our choices, how each decision shapes our paths in ways we can't always foresee. Life is a series of crossroads, each path leading to a different destination. Sarah's path led her down a road of heartache and loss, a result of choices made and paths taken. Mine led me to a new beginning with Emily, a chance to build a life based on love, trust, and shared dreams. As Sarah's figure faded into the city's backdrop, I realized that our story was a lesson in choices and consequences. It was a reminder to cherish what you have, to make decisions wisely, and always look forward, even when the past tries to pull you back. In the end, it's the paths we choose that define us, for better or worse. And as the plane soared higher, I was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, with Emily by my side, and the path